case that we can see colors. And the question is, why? And the answer is because we evolved to see ripe fruit. So in the story of Adam and Eve, human beings are given vision by the snake and the fruit. And that turns out to be correct. So isn't that something? And then you think, what role do women play in relationship to men? Well, first, they make them self-conscious. Let's not ever forget about that. Because I would say the primary role that women have in relationship to men is to make them self-conscious. And men don't precisely like that. There's nothing that will make a man more self-conscious than being rejected. And why? Because why is he rejected? Well, obviously, Mother Nature, in the guise of that particular woman, has said, you're not so bad for a friend, but there's no reason that your genetic material should propagate itself into the future. Right, well, and it's not like men are exactly happy about being made self-conscious by women, right? It's a major source of continual tension between men and women, and it's no wonder. But it's also the case, and this is something really cool and interesting to know, you know, we diverged, we diverged from the common ancestor between us and chimpanzees about 6 million years ago. Here's why, at least in part. Chimpanzee females are non-discriminate maters. They'll mate with any male. When they go into heat, which human females don't, when they go into heat, then any male is allowed access. Now the dominant males chase the subordinate males away. And so the dominant males are more likely to leave offspring, but it's not because of the female choice. It's not the case with human beings. Human females engage in hypergamy, and hypergamy is and this is also true cross-culturally, and it's also quite, it's just as extensive in Scandinavia. Not quite, there's a bit of attenuation, but not much. Women mate across and up dominance hierarchies. Men mate across and down. Okay, and that has to be the case because obviously it has to work that way. If one goes up, the other has to go down. The socioeconomic status of a woman is determines almost zero of her attractiveness towards a man. Whereas the socioeconomic status of a man is a major determinant of his attractiveness towards a woman. And it isn't his wealth either, because that's been tested. It's his capacity to generate and be productive and to share, because that beats the hell out of wealth. Wealth can disappear, right? But the capacity to be productive and share, that's a much more important element. And why not be chosen on the basis of that, especially because women have to have infants, and infants make the woman dependent, and the woman is just looking logically, rationally, and from an evolutionary perspective for someone who's useful enough to lend a hand. So women make intense demands on men, and it's no wonder. But the thing is that because women engaged in hypergamy, at least in part, we diverged quite rapidly from chimpanzees, because the selection pressure that women placed on men developed the entire species. Now there's two things that happened as far as I could tell. The men competed for competence, let's say. So the male hierarchy is a mechanism that pushes the best men to the top, virtually by definition, and then the effect of that is multiplied by the fact that women who are hypergamous peel from the top, and so that the males who are the most competent are much more likely to leave offspring, and that seemed to be what drove our cortical expansion, for example, which happened very, very rapidly over the course of evolutionary time. So, and when the woman saw that the tree was good for food and that it was pleasant to the eyes and a tree to be desired to make one wise, she took of the fruit thereof and did eat, and gave also unto her husband with her, and he did eat. Oh yes, and women share food. That's a very strange thing, because most creatures don't do that, right? Most animals don't share food. Like if you're a wolf and you bring down something in a hunt, you eat your fill. The dominant creatures eat their fill, and then if there's some left over, the subordinates get to eat too. But that isn't how human beings work. We share food. Now you can imagine how that evolved, because lots of female creatures share food with their offspring. Okay, you don't need much of a twist in that from an evolutionary perspective till you start to share food not only with your offspring, say, but with your mate. And that's another way that you entice a mate. It's like, we're going to be better together than alone. Well, that's the offering of the fruit. Well, what's the self-conscious part? Well, here's part of the bargain, you know. I'm going to wake you up. And partly I'm going to wake you up because you need to be woken up, because I have this infant that needs some damn care. And so you bloody well better be awake. And part of the bargain is I'll offer you something, I'll offer you some food, and in response we're going to make a team, and that's the deal. Well, and that's the human deal, and that's why we're more or less monogamous, by why we more or less pair bond, and why something approximating marriage is a human universal. It's cross-cultural. Now you can find exceptions, but who the hell cares? The vast, really man, who cares? You look at the vast pattern. The vast pattern, well, and the price we pay for having large brains is that we're very dependent, and it takes a long time for us to get programmed, and because of that we need relatively stable family bonding, and that's basically what we've evolved. And you know, you don't get that without making men self-conscious, because male creatures, why not impregnate and run? I mean, why the hell not? And that's something to really, no kidding, like that's the thing to think about. It is not why men abandon their children, that's the mystery. It's why any men ever stick with them. That's the mystery. Because you just have to look at the animal kingdom. And like the simplest and easiest thing is always the most likely thing to occur. So it's the exception, the long-term commitment that needs explanation. She took of the fruit thereof and did eat, and gave also unto her husband with her, and he did eat. And the eyes of both of them were opened, implying that before that they were closed. And they knew they were naked. And they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves aprons. So that's so interesting. So their eyes are open, which indicates that they weren't to begin with. So whatever God created to begin with was kind of blind. But not blind in some strange way, because they weren't obviously wandering around in the garden bumping into trees. It was some sort of metaphysical blindness that's been removed by whatever has just happened. And whatever's just happened also made them realize that they were naked. Okay, so what sort of eye-opening is that? Well, what does it mean to realize that you're naked? It means to realize that you're vulnerable. That's what people discovered. It's like, oh, we can be hurt. So you're a zebra in a herd of zebras, and there's a bunch of lions around there laying on the grass. You don't care. Those are laying down lions. Laying down lions are no problem. It's standing up hunting lions that are the problem. You're not smart enough to figure out that laying down lions turn into standing up hunting lions, so you're not like building a fort to keep the lions out. You're just mindlessly eating grass. You're not very awake. But that's not what happens to human beings, is they wake up and they think, we're vulnerable permanently. It's never going away, right? It's the recognition of that eternal vulnerability. And what happens? The first thing they do is clothe themselves. Well, what happens when you're naked, when you need protection from the world? Well, obviously, look, you're all wearing clothes, you know? Why? Well, we've been doing that for a very, very long period of time. It's tens of thousands of years at minimum. In fact, you can track more or less when clothing developed, because you can do DNA testing of the kind of lice that cling to clothes rather than hair. And so we have a pretty good idea of when clothing emerged, and of different types as well. So that's quite cool. But the point is, they're naked and they think, that's not so good. We're vulnerable. So their eyes were open enough so they become self-conscious. And they recognize their own vulnerability. And the first thing they do is the first step of culture is to protect themselves with something from the world. And you protect yourself from the world and from the prying eyes of other people. This is the book by Lynn